Nadine stepped off the early bus and walked up the wide stone steps of the Grand Royale. The air was cool and still, and a soft pink light was rising across the sky. She carried a small tote bag with her uniform neatly folded inside. She paused for a moment on the top step to take in the palace-like hotel facade. The columns rose high above her head, and shining windows reflected the new day. She felt a small flutter of nerves mixed with pride. This place was famous in the city for its flawless service and rich history. And she worked here now. Inside, the grand lobby was hushed. The floors were a smooth marble of cream and gray, arranged in a checkerboard pattern that led toward the front desk. Tall potted plants with bright green leaves stood like silent sentinels by each side of the counter. A large crystal chandelier hung in the center, its glass prisms catching the morning light and scattering it in gentle rainbows on the walls. The scent of fresh flowers drifted in the air from a row of bouquets that Nadine had set out the day before. She felt a thrill each time she passed those flowers. They seemed to welcome guests with color and warmth, just as she did. Nadine hung her bag in the staff locker and slipped on her crisp hotel uniforma, white blouse with a neat collar and a dark skirt that fell just below her knees. The front of her blouse checked her hair in the small mirror by the locker and ran her fingers over the name tag pinned to her chest, Nadine. Then she stepped out into the lobby. She moved quietly across the marble floor, glancing at the polished brass fixtures she would soon dust and shine. Her footsteps were soft but steady, because she knew the routine by heart now. Each morning, before the guests stirred, she went through this same ritual, restocking brochures, wiping fingerprints from glass display cases, straightening each chair and table. At exactly 6:15, the front desk phone rang. Usually Nadine didn't answer that call. The reception shift began at 7, but a gentle voice called out from behind the desk. "Nadine, could you please?" It was Ms. Lopez, the front desk manager. Nadine nodded and stepped forward as she had been trained to do. She lifted the receiver and pressed it to her ear. "Good morning, Grand Royale," she said, her voice soft and clear. A moment later, she realized the caller was not speaking in English. She listened for a second, then surprised herself by slipping effortlessly into Dutch. "Good morgen, met Nadine," she said, using the formal phrasing she had practiced to perfection. "How can I you help him?" The caller responded, and Nadine nodded and answered. She spoke professionally, as if she truly belonged to his world. She confirmed a meeting time, adjusted a billing detail, and ended the call with a polite "Dank u wel fijzien, dag gewenst." Then she replaced the receiver. With the same quiet click she used for all hotel calls, Nadine's chest felt light, as if she had just danced indoors on a sunny afternoon. Yet she also felt a sudden rush of nerves. She had spoken Dutch so easily. But to whom? She turned and saw Mr. Peter Vandermeer standing by the desk, his tall frame dressed in a dark tailored suit that made him look like he had stepped out of a fashion magazine. His eyes were warm brown, thoughtful, and curious as they studied her. Nadine's heart skipped. He looked as though he was waiting for an answer to a question, yet his face was polite and calm. She offered a brief smile and began her routine. Once more, adjusting the reception bell, arranging the guest directory and local guidebook on the countertop. She hoped her cheeks were not glowing red dot over the next few moments. Mr. Vandermeer did not check in formally. Instead, he stayed nearby, watching as Nadine worked with care. He picked up one of the guidebooks, flipped through pages of local attractions, then set it down gently. He leaned slightly forward and in a quiet voice asked, "Voca falar Hollands?" But Nadine was off guard by the Portuguese phrasing. She decided to answer simply in Dutch again. "Ja, ik spreek Nederlands." She realized that speaking another language was no burden to her. It was a gift, one she valued deeply because it reminded her of home. Mr. Vandermeer straightened and said in accented Dutch, "I did not expect to hear my language here." His voice carried a hint of surprise, and something else, perhaps a wish for connection. Nadine looked up at him, recognized the faint Dutch accent beneath his English, and gave a small nod. "I learned Dutch as a child," she explained in clear, slow English so he could understand fully. My family lived in Rotterdam. We moved here when I was 12. He studied her for a moment, as though he was piecing together a puzzle. His hands were clasped loosely in front of him, knuckles pressing into his palms. The morning sun shifted, sending a soft glow through the tall windows and painting a golden stripe across the marble. He folded a corner of his suit pocket square, neatly, and pressed his lips together in thought. That must have been a big change, he said at last. Leaving home, starting over. Nadine paused, considering how much to share. In her life, leaving Rotterdam had been both a challenge and an adventure. Her parents had sought a new beginning, and she had learned English in school and at home each day. Yes, she said simply. It was hard at first, but my parents wanted more for us. I learned to speak English. I learned to wash dishes. I learned to be strong. She glanced around at the lobby around them, the silent promise of luxury in every polished surface. Now I work here. I do my best. Mr. Vandermeer straightened his jacket and smiled, a thoughtful, slow smile that felt genuine. He reached into his coat pocket and handed her a plain white business card. Nadine took it, surprised by the weight of it in her hand. She looked down at her own name printed on her uniform, and then at his card, where his name and title glowed in simple black ink. Peter Vandermeer, CEO Vandermeer Industries. He said, I have a meeting at the embassy this morning, but I also have a community project here. We need someone who can speak both Dutch and English, who understands local customs, and can help people connect across language. Would you be interested in helping me after your shift? Nadine's breath caught. She swallowed and looked at him, her eyes wide with surprise and hope. He offered a reassuring nod. I'll make the time. This is important work, and I think you would be perfect. For a moment, Nadine felt as if she floated above the marble floor. She had never imagined that her knowledge of Dutch, she had once thought only a memory of childhood, could open a door like this. She felt the weight of her uniform, the softness of her apron, and the quiet hum of the lobby around them. Then she met his gaze firmly and said, Yes, I would be honored. Her words felt solid. Sure. He smiled and patted her shoulder in a gentle, respectful way. Thank you, Nadine. I look forward to working with you. Then he turned and walked toward the elevator, stepping inside and pressing the button for the top floor. Nadine watched him go, clutching his business card like a treasure. She placed it carefully in her apron pocket and turned back to her duties. But something inside her had changed. The Grand Royale lobby felt the same, yet different, full of new promise and possibilities that she had never dared to dream of. Before, her morning had begun like any other, but it was clear that by its end, her life would be very different indeed. Nadine finished her morning duties and slipped into the staff locker room, her heart still racing from the invitation. She carefully hung her uniform, smoothed her hair again, and tucked Peter's business card into her wallet. The card felt heavy, as if it carried a promise. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that this was not a dream. She had said yes. After her shift ended at noon, Nadine hurried across the marble lobby toward the side entrance where staff entered and exited. The Grand Royale's back hallways were quieter, lined with paintings of old hotel owners and polished wooden benches. She found the service elevator and pressed the button. The doors opened with a soft whoosh. Inside, she breathed in the scent of cleaning solution and fresh linens so familiar, yet now she felt excitement bubbling beneath her calm. Peter had left instructions at the front desk. He would wait in suite 1802 on the 18th floor. Nadine rode the elevator upward, counting each floor as the doors slid closed. When the numbers reached 18, the doors opened onto a quiet hallway. She walked to suite 1802, her footsteps echoing softly. She paused before the heavy door, smoothed her skirt, and knocked twice. A calm voice said, "Please come in." Nadine pushed open the door and stepped into a spacious suite filled with warm light. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city's skyline, and a low sofa sat beside a polished coffee table. Peter stood by the window, looking out at the busy streets below. He turned and smiled when he saw her. "Thank you for coming," he said in English, with a gentle accent. He gestured toward the sofa. "Have a seat. Would you like tea or coffee?" Nadine sat carefully, smoothing her skirt. "Tea is fine," she said. Peter nodded and pressed a button on the wall. Moments later, a small tray with 2 cups and a pot arrived on a rolling table, guided by a silent bellboy. Peter poured steaming tea into both cups and handed one to Nadine. She held the warm cup and breathed in the fragrant steam. "Thank you," she said. Peter sat opposite her. "I want to tell you more about the project," he said. "A community center for underprivileged children. Many Dutch families who moved here feel lost because of language and culture. We want to make them feel at home. I need someone who can speak Dutch and English, someone who knows both worlds." Nadine nodded, thinking of her own family's struggles when they first arrived. She felt a familiar tug at her heart, remembering her parents trying to read forms in English, the confusion, the fear. "I understand," she said softly. "I remember how hard it was." Peter smiled kindly. "That is exactly why I think you are perfect for this role. The center opens next week. We'll have a small ceremony with diplomats and local officials. I need you to translate speeches, guide guests, and help with press interviews. It will not be easy, but I believe you can do it." Nadine's mind raced. Speaking Dutch for a call was one thing. Now she would stand before real guests and important people. She felt a flicker of doubt. She looked at Peter's calm face and felt his confidence wrap around her like a shield. "I will do my best," she said with quiet determination. Ter's smile widened. "Good. Let's start today. We'll go over the schedule." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed programs, speeches in Dutch and English, and a list of names and titles. Nadine opened the folder and studied the pages. She traced her finger down the list of speakers, Dutch dignitaries, local council members, journalists. She read the speeches slowly, noting difficult words. Peter watched her as she worked. After they reviewed the schedule, Peter suggested they visit the community center location. He waved a hand and said, "Follow me." Nadine picked up her purse and followed him out of the suite. They took the service elevator down to the hotel lobby, stepped past polished front desks, and out through the side doors. Outside, the sun warmed the sidewalk. A black car waited, its engine idling quietly. A driver greeted them and opened the rear door. Peter nodded, and Nadine slid into the seat beside him. As the car drove through the city's streets, Nadine watched. Familiar shops go by bakeries with rows of fresh bread, street vendors selling fruit, parents pushing strollers along tree-lined sidewalks. Peter pointed out landmarks and spoke softly about his plans. Nadine listened, repeating details in her mind. She felt the weight of responsibility, but also a spark of excitement. Soon they arrived at a low building, painted white with blue trim. A small sign read, "Community Center opening soon." Peter stepped out first, and Nadine followed. She noticed the empty bulletin boards, fresh paint, and a dusty floor. She imagined children running, laughing, teachers speaking in Dutch and English. Peter unlocked the door and led her inside. Echoes bounced off the high ceiling. A row of folding chairs stood in neat lines awaiting guests. Simple stage with a lectern faced the chairs. Peter switched on lights hung from the ceiling, and the room brightened. He poured 2 bottles of water for them. "Here is where you will stand," he said, pointing to the lectern. "You will interpret speeches here, introduce each speaker, and make announcements in both languages." Nadine walked to the lectern and tested the microphone. She cleared her throat and said, "Go to Middags in Hern. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen." Her voice sounded small in the large room, but steady. "That was perfect," Peter said, clapping softly. "Remember to pause between sentences so people can follow. Practice as much as you need." Nadine spent the next hour rehearsing introductions, switching between Dutch and English. It stumbled over one phrase, but repeated it until it rolled off her tongue smoothly. Peter offered gentle corrections, explaining nuances in tone and pacing. Nadine made notes in her folder and felt more confident with each practice. After practice, Peter asked if she had time to visit the local Dutch consulate. He wanted her to introduce him to the consul. Nadine agreed. They returned to the car and drove to a building with a small crest above the entrance. The driver took them inside through marble floors and polished brass doors. The consul, a dignified woman in her 50s, greeted them in Dutch and then switched to English when Nadine entered. Nadine watched carefully as Peter spoke with the consul. When the consul turned to Nadine and spoke in Dutch, Nadine replied in elegant Dutch, flawless and clear. The consul's eyes brightened. "Your Dutch is beautiful," she said. "Would be honored to help at the center opening." Nadine smiled and felt pride swell on her chest. She translated the consul's agreement to Peter in English. Peter shook the consul's hand and thanked her. Nadine wondered how much her life had changed in a single day. When they returned to the hotel that afternoon, Nadine found a fresh uniform waiting in her locker. She changed quickly and went out to finish her cleaning duties. She saw guests pass by, oblivious to the hidden role she was about to play. Her hands polished brass doorknobs, her cloth wiped dust from the elevators. But her mind was alive with plans and speeches. That evening, after the hotel closed and the last guests had climbed to their rooms, Nadine slipped out again to the community center for one final rehearsal. The chairs were gone, replaced by rows of folding tables covered in white cloth.
Gentle.
Lights shone on the stage. Nadine practiced her lines under the soft glow, hearing her voice echo back. She no longer felt small under the high ceiling. She felt ready. As she walked back to the hotel under the soft glow of street lamps, Nadine thought about her family. She imagined telling her parents about this day, the invitations, the meetings, the honor of working with a Dutch consul. Knew they would be proud. She pictured her little brother asking her questions, her mother hugging her tight. She smiled to herself. Inside her locker room, she changed out of her uniform again. She placed her notes and folder in a small bag and slid it onto her shoulder. Nadine paused in front of the mirror and looked at herself, her hair tied back neatly, her face calm but bright. She no longer saw just a hotel maid. She saw a bridge between worlds, someone who could help others feel at home just as she had. Once wished for herself, she slipped out of the back door and into the quiet night, her steps light, her heart hopeful. The community center's lights twinkled in the distance, a beacon calling her forward. Nadine walked toward it, ready to embrace the work ahead, ready to speak the words that would bring people together. Tonight, she would dream of the opening day, of faces she would meet, of voices she would translate. And she would know that this was only the beginning of a journey that had begun with a single phone call and a chance to speak in Dutch. The morning sun slipped through the curtains as Nadine awoke with a fluttering heart. She lay still for a moment, recalling the events of the night before her solo rehearsal under the soft glow of lamps. The sense of purpose that filled her chest, she swung her legs over the side of the bed and sat up, smoothing the sheets with a gentle hand. Today was the day. Community Center would open its doors to children, families, and dignitaries from both the Dutch and local communities. Nadine dressed carefully in the uniform Ms. Vandermeer had provided. A tailored navy blazer over a crisp white blouse, dark trousers, and polished black shoes. She placed Peter's business card into the breast pocket of her blazer as a talisman of the path she had chosen. Downstairs, the Grand Royal lobby buzzed with quiet activity as staff prepared for the busy day ahead. Nadine moved through the polished marble hallways with purpose. She exchanged polite nods with the bellhops and doormen as she made her way to the staff entrance. She found her folder waiting at the back desk, its edges neat and crisp. Inside lay the final program sheets, printed in both Dutch and English, and a small stack of name tags. She took a deep breath, adjusted her blazer, and slipped out the door into the morning air. A black sedan awaited by the curb, its driver opening the rear door as Nadine approached. She stepped in, offering a small, confident smile. The car's engine purred to life, and they set off for the community center. As the city streets passed by, Nadine reviewed the schedule again in her mind. Arrival, ribbon cutting, speeches, tours, refreshments, interviews. She imagined herself stepping to the lectern, voice steady, words clear. She could almost hear her own greeting. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, Godmorgen, dames, and heren. At the center, guests already gathered on the sidewalk, chatting. In small clusters, flags of the Netherlands and of the city fluttered beside the entrance. Colorful balloons swayed in the gentle breeze, tied to lampposts and railings. Children in bright T-shirts chased each other across the pavement, their laughter ringing like chimes. Parents and community members milled about, holding coffee cups and program booklets. Journalists balanced cameras on tripods, adjusting lenses. Nadine slipped from the car and felt a surge of energy. She walked to the side of the building, where a long red ribbon hung between two polished posts. A pair of large scissors lay on a small table draped in white cloth. At the lectern inside, staff arranged microphones and tested audio levels. Peter stood nearby in his dark suit and crisp tie, greeting each guest with a warm handshake.
"What?"
Nadine reached him. He nodded and whispered, "You ready?" His eyes shone with pride. Nadine took her place just behind Peter to one side of the ribbon. A hush fell as the mayor approached, flanked by the Dutch consul and several local council members. The mayor's voice carried warmly over the small crowd. He spoke first in English, welcoming everyone to the new center. Then, in a smooth shift, he delivered the same words in Dutch. Nadine listened, noting each pause and each shift in tone. When the mayor stepped aside, Peter stepped forward, unfolding the speech Nadine had helped him perfect. At the lectern, Peter cleared his throat. Nadine stood beside him, folder in hand, guiding her eyes to his next line.
Ow.
She watched his lips. Form each word in Dutch, waited the beat of silence, then spoke the translation in English. Her voice was calm, clear, like a gentle stream flowing between stones. She felt the weight of the moment, but also the strength of her preparation. As each speaker finished, Nadine guided the audience to applause, switching nimbly between languages, bridging smiles and understanding. After the opening speeches, the scissors were raised. The consul held one handle, the mayor the other. Peter picked up the blade, and with a sharp cut, the ribbon fell to the ground. The crowd cheered. Confetti floated through the air, and children darted forward to pick it up, laughing with delight. Nadine stepped aside, allowing the guests to flow into the lobby. She noted the bright tiles, the fresh paint, the rows of chairs set in neat arcs. The lectern where she had just stood seemed smaller now that so many people filled the room. Nadine guided guests to seats, offering words of direction in whichever language they preferred. She helped an elderly Dutch couple find a comfortable spot near the front, then showed a local teacher to the back row, explaining where refreshments would be served after the tour. A little boy tugged at her sleeve, asking in Dutch where his mother was. She crouched down, pointed to a woman near the stage, and smiled as the boy bounded off. Each small action felt important, each smile a thread weaving the two communities together. Next came the tours. Guests moved in groups down bright hallways, past classrooms filled with colorful posters, play areas with neatly stacked toys, and a library corner lined with books in both languages. Nadine led one group, explaining the purpose of each room. "This is the art studio," she said in English, then repeated in Dutch. "Children can paint and draw here." She watched their faces light up, saw the nods of approval from parents and officials. Peter hovered nearby, greeting guests. Shaking hands, his suit jacket slightly rumpled from the excitement. At mid-morning, journalists gathered for interviews. Cameras clicked and microphones hovered. Nadine translated each question and recorded each answer. A reporter in a suit spoke in Dutch, asking Peter about the funding and future plans for Nadine. The center. Nadine caught every nuance, relayed the query in English with calm precision. Peter's replies came easily, his gratitude clear as he spoke of Nadine's help and of the team's vision. Afterward, a group of local reporters approached Nadine, asking for her story. She blushed as they asked how she had come to speak Dutch so well and what it felt like to be part of this historic day. She answered simply, humbly, "I learned as a child, and I am honored to help." Their pens scratched across notepads, and Nadine noticed a small line of admiration in their eyes. As the hour grew late, guests gathered once more in the main hall for refreshments. White tables held trays of finger sandwiches, plates of pastries, small glasses of juice, and cups of tea. Nadine poured tea for the consul, then coordinated with the catering staff to refill platters. She switched between Dutch and English, as guests chatted, laughing in one language, then pausing to hear an echo in the other. She felt her heart swell with pride. This was more than a job. This was her story, woven from threads of language, culture, and courage. By noon, the crowd thinned. Families stayed behind to play games and decorate a community mural on the far wall. Children dipped brushes into paint, their laughter bright as the colors they spread. Nadine knelt beside a young girl holding a palette, helping her choose a shade of blue for the sky. The girl smiled up at Nadine in Dutch. Dank je wel. Nadine smiled back. Graag gedaan, she said, in the language that once felt distant, now so warm on her tongue. Peter found Nadine near the mural and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You were amazing, he said, his voice low. I could not have done this without you. Nadine glanced around at the mural, vivid children under a shining sun, hands joined across a painted globe. She thought of her own journey, a young girl learning Dutch in Rotterdam, moving to a new city, working late nights as a maid, and now standing here as a bridge between two homes. She felt tears prick her eyes, but blinked them away. She would not cry in front of everyone. I just did what I could, she replied softly. Peter shook his head. No, he said, you did more. You brought people together. You gave them hope and a voice. Nadine felt warmth spread through her, like morning light on cold stone. She looked at Peter, at the painted mural, at the families laughing and chatting in two languages at once. Here, in this room, her world had grown larger, richer. The sun had climbed high by the time Nadine returned to the hotel. She slipped back into her uniform and replaced the blazer with her maid's apron. She moved through the lobby with practiced grace, polishing glass doors and dusting counters. Beneath her calm exterior, her mind replayed moments of the morning. The hush before the speeches, the snap of the ribbon, the first crackle of confetti, the hush of microphones, the brushstrokes of children's art. Each moment was a treasure she would carry forever. That evening, when the Grand Royale quieted and the last guest checked out, Nadine gathered her folder and stepped out into the night once more. She paused under the glow of a street lamp, looking back at the hotel, then ahead at the community center's lights in the distance. She smiled, knowing that she belonged in both places now. The hotel would always be home, but the center was her new stage. Her voice had bridged worlds today, and tomorrow it would do so again. With determined steps, Nadine walked toward the center, ready to begin the work that would continue to unite hearts and voices, one word at a time. Nadine woke early the next morning with a quiet excitement. She still felt the happy buzz from the opening day, but now new challenges lay ahead. Today, she would lead her first real class at the community center. She dressed in simple clothes, dark slacks, and a light sweater, and tucked Peter's card into her pocket. When she arrived at the center, the sunlight streamed through the windows, turning dust motes into tiny golden sparks. She breathed deeply and smiled. This place felt like her own little home now, filled with echoing footsteps, laughter, and the soft hum of conversation in two languages. She moved over to the art studio where she had volunteered to help that morning. Tables were set with paper, crayons, and simple paints. A small group of children waited, some shy, others fidgety with energy. Their parents sat on folding chairs. Around the edges of the room, watching quietly, Nadine welcomed them in both English and Dutch. Good morning, everyone. Go to Morgan allemaal. The children looked up, some nodding, some giggling. She felt the warm glow of connection as she saw children's eyes light up, their faces curious and bright. Her lesson was simple. She held up a blank sheet of paper and asked each child to draw someone they loved. Nadine explained in English, then repeated in Dutch. A little boy named Kareem raised his hand and asked his question in Dutch. Nadine answered gently, in both languages. He smiled and got to work, shading with his crayons. All around the room, children bent over their papers, colors streaking across white. Nadine walked slowly between tables, offering help, saying words of encouragement. Very nice, she said in Dutch, then in English. That is beautiful. Each word carried warmth. As the lesson continued, Nadine noticed one little girl, Amina, struggling. She held her crayon awkwardly and her drawing showed only a few broken lines. Kneeled beside her and spoke softly. Do you need help? She asked in English, then Dutch. Amina looked up, her eyes curious and sad. Nadine took a bright red crayon and guided her hand, showing her how to draw a simple heart shape. Like this, Nadine said gently. Mina tried again, and a small smile appeared on her face. Nadine felt a surge of joy. Moments like this made her work feel important and true. After the art session, parents thanked Nadine. Some spoke only English, some only Dutch, and a few switched between both. Each time, Nadine translated news of their child's success. She drew your family, Nadine told one mother in Dutch, then smiled in English as she repeated it to another parent. She felt a proud warmth in her chest. She had bridged two worlds, helping people share joy and pride across language. By late morning, she returned to the hotel for her regular duties. She slipped back into her uniform and moved quietly through the lobby. Polishing silver, dusting glass, straightening brochures, her work felt soothing and steady, like a calm current beneath the surface. But her mind kept returning to the center, to the bright paints, the small hands, the laughter. When the afternoon shift ended, she hurried back to the center for a planning meeting with Peter and a small team. Papers, schedules, and lists waited on a table. They talked through after-school programs, food for events, and future fundraising. Nadine took notes in both languages, her handwriting neat. Peter looked to her for advice on wording invitations. She offered gentle suggestions. He nodded, grateful. One challenge came up during the meeting. A local reporter had asked for an interview in only Dutch, but most children spoke English better. The interview might leave some families confused. Peter frowned and looked at Nadine. What should we do? He asked. Nadine thought for a moment, then spoke with calm confidence. We can do a short intro in Dutch, then switch to English. She suggested, that way we honor our Dutch guests, and all families can understand the rest. Peter smiled. Perfect, he agreed. They adjusted the plan. Nadine felt pleased her words had solved a real problem. After planning, Nadine stayed at the center to greet a new group of volunteers. They were university students who had come to help children with reading. Nadine led them on a quick tour explaining rooms and rules. She spoke in both languages, pausing so they could follow. The students listened carefully and thanked her. Nadine felt proud of her clear voice, her calm guidance. She remembered how lost she once felt in a new country, and how much she wished someone had shown her the way. Now, she was that guide for others. Evening came, and Nadine walked home under fading daylight. She carried her bag lightly, filled with notes and plans. On the bus ride, she looked out at the city lights starting to glow. She thought about her parents and little brother back in Rotterdam. She missed their laughter and warm kitchen smells. She pulled out her phone and sent a quick message to her sister. Today went well. I helped an art class and solved the interview plan. Mom would be proud. She smiled when her sister replied with a string of heart emojis. Back at her small apartment, Nadine cooked a simple meal, rice and vegetables, and ate, while watching a Dutch news channel. She laughed when she recognized a word, felt her skills grow. After washing dishes, she sat at her small desk and reviewed the day's events. She wrote in a notebook, "Children smiled today. I helped a girl draw her mother's face. Solved the interview," Peter said. "I did well." Then she closed her eyes for a moment, feeling grateful. The next morning brought a fresh challenge. When Nadine arrived at the center, she found a notice on the door. The power would be off for repairs this afternoon. That meant no lights, no computer, no microphone. She felt a twinge of worry. How could they hold a storytelling session with no sound? She hurried inside and found Peter waiting, frowning. Date. Took a steady breath. Gotta move it to the library room, she said. It has windows that catch sunlight until late, and we can use flashlights if needed. Peter's face relaxed. He nodded. Do it, he said. Nadine set to work, reorganizing chairs by the windows, gathering a stack of books and lining flashlights on the front table. When children and families arrived that afternoon, they found the cozy library room instead of the big hall. Nadine welcomed them with a bright smile. She sat beside Peter on a small bench, each holding a book. The children sat on the carpet, leaning forward. Even in the fading light, their eyes were bright with curiosity. Peter began reading in Dutch, his voice soft and steady. Nadine translated each sentence into English, her words clear and warm. Though the room grew dimmer, the story glowed in everyone's minds. At the end, the children clapped and cheered. Nadine felt a rush of relief and pride. The plan had worked. As she cleaned up afterward, Nadine noticed one boy holding a small flashlight under his chin, making spooky shadows on the ceiling. He pointed and giggled. Nadine laughed too, feeling joy bubble up. She picked up the flashlight and shone it. On her face, making silly shapes, the boy laughed harder. For a moment, the library was filled with simple fun. Nadine realized that sometimes small ideas could bring great happiness. She switched off all extra lights and let the children walk out into the dark hallway, each holding a flashlight like a treasure. That night, Nadine tucked into bed with tired but happy shoulders. She thought of how the power outage had seemed like a disaster, but had turned into a chance to create something special. She thought of Peter praising her quick solution, of children's laughter echoing under the low ceiling. She closed her eyes with a soft smile, knowing she belonged here. Over the next weeks, Nadine settled into a steady rhythm. Mornings at the center, afternoons at the hotel, evenings studying Dutch and planning programs. She helped new volunteers learn routines. She translated brochures into Dutch. She even organized a small weekend trip to a nearby park, arranging buses and guides. Each task felt to her like a stepping stone on a path she had chosen. Her world had grown larger, richer, filled with purpose and community. And every morning, as she crossed the hotel's marble lobby or stepped into the center's bright rooms, she carried the quiet confidence of someone who knew her voice mattered and who believed that languages, like bridges, could connect hearts across any divide. Nadine woke before sunrise, her mind already full of plans and memories. Today was the last day of the center's first month open, and she felt both joy and a gentle sadness. She dressed in her favorite navy blazer and white blouse, the outfit she wore for special days. She tucked Pitar's business card into her pocket, as she always did, like a lucky charm. The early light fell across her small apartment as she slipped out the door. Her footsteps soft on the pavement. At the Grand Royale lobby, Nadine paused to breathe in the cool air and steady her heart. The hotel was calm now, before the early rush of guests. She slid her name badge into place and began her morning chores. As she polished the silver door handles and dusted the brochure racks, she thought of all she had done, teaching art, solving problems, guiding volunteers, and speaking words that built friendship between cultures. Felt proud, but also new. Another part of her heart waited at the community center when her shift ended. Nadine gathered her things and walked to the back entrance. The same black sedan waited to take her to the center. She climbed in and smiled at the driver, who tipped his cap politely. As the city passed by, she closed her eyes for a moment, remembering the ribbon cutting at the opening, the laughter of children in the library, and the glow in Peter's eyes when he thanked her. She felt a warmth inside, the knowledge that her life had changed in ways she had never imagined. At the center, banners hung above the entrance, readings celebrating 1 month together in both Dutch and English. Balloons of blue, white, and gold floated beside the doors. A long table with colorful cloth awaited inside, loaded with small cakes, finger sandwiches, juice boxes, and coffee. Chairs were set in rows facing a small stage where the lectern stood. Nadine's folder lay on a side table, along with name tags and a list of speakers. Volunteers bustled about, some arranging chairs, others placing flowers in vases. Children's art lined the walls, painted hearts, handprints in bright colors, drawings of families holding hands. Nadine walked slowly along the walls, touching each picture lightly. She remembered helping the children draw the first hearts, guiding their small hands. Now these artworks were a testament to all they had built together. She felt a proud glow, like the first rays of sun crossing the horizon. Peter arrived, shoot crisp, tie straight, face bright. He thanked volunteers and shook hands with parents as they arrived, and When he saw Nadine, he crossed the room and put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You look ready," he said. Nadine smiled. "I do," she replied. "But I'll need your help on stage." Peter nodded, his eyes kind. "I'll stand by you," he said, as a hush fell over the guest families, local officials, Dutch community members. Nadine stepped to the lectern, the room filled with quiet expectation. Cleared her throat and spoke, first in Dutch, "Goedemiddag allemaal. Vandaag vieren we samen. Inmond van vriendschap, leren in vreugd." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. Then, in English, "Good afternoon, everyone. Today we celebrate 1 month of friendship, learning, and joy." Her voice was calm and warm, steady as a gentle stream. She invited Peter forward. He stood beside her and unfolded the paper in his hands. As he spoke, Nadine listened, watching his face. He thanked the community for their support, praised volunteers for their kindness, and spoke of dreams for the future. After each line in Dutch, Nadine repeated it in English, and after each English line, she repeated in Dutch. The echo of 2 languages wove through the room, like threads in a tapestry. Guests nodded in appreciation, some wiping eyes as memories stirred in their hearts. When Peter finished, Nadine stepped back to the lectern. "Now," she said, "we will hear from those who made this possible." She invited a volunteer coordinator, a local teacher, and a representative of the Dutch community to speak. After each speech, Nadine stitched the translation between languages. She felt the flow of connection, the beauty of shared understanding. In that moment, she knew her work mattered, not only to her, but to everyone in the room. After the speeches, it was time for the children's performance. A group of smiling boys and girls came forward, holding papers with lines they had practiced. They recited a short poem about friendship, switching languages mid-verse. Nadine watched, tears bright in her eyes, as the children spoke with confidence and pride. Their voices rose and fell like birds in flight. When they finished, the room erupted in applause. Nadine joined in, clapping until her hands felt sore, her heart full. Then came the ribbon of speeches and small awards for volunteers. Nadine handed certificates to each person, saying their names correctly in both Dutch and English. She felt a gentle thrill each time someone looked at her with gratitude. A young volunteer said, "Dank je Nadine," she replied, "Graag gedaan," and then turned to the crowd with a smile. She felt like a conductor guiding an orchestra of voices across a grand stage. The celebration moved to refreshments. Nadine poured tea for the Dutch guests and coffee for others. She offered sandwiches to parents and juice boxes to children. She translated conversations, laughing along when jokes crossed languages. She felt her heart hum with happiness, knowing she had grown into this roller bridge between worlds, a voice of welcome and warmth. Later, as guests milled around, she slipped outside for a moment of quiet. The sun was high now, bathing the center's courtyard in golden light. She looked at the banners and balloons and thought of how far they had come. 1 month ago, this was an empty building. Now, it was a home filled with learning, laughter, and connection. She touched the ribbon that still hung near the entrance and closed her eyes. Breathing in the scent of fresh paint and flowers, Peter found her and stood beside her quietly. He offered her a small wrapped box. Nadine blinked in surprise and took it. Inside was a delicate silver pin in the shape of 2 interlocking hands, one engraved with the Dutch flag's colors, the other with the local flags. A simple, beautiful symbol of unity. Nadine's breath caught. She looked at Peter, who smiled kindly. "It's for you," he said softly. "To thank you for everything. You've brought us together." Nadine felt tears sting her eyes. She clasped the pin in her hand. "Thank you," she whispered. She pinned it to her lapel, near her heart. The rest of the afternoon passed in a happy blur. Volunteers and guests took photos in front of the art wall. Children played games in the courtyard, and the staff served cake on folded tables under a tent. Nadine moved among them, words flowing easily in both languages. She felt a peaceful joy settle over her, like a warm blanket on a cool evening. She knew this moment would live inside her forever. As the sun began to dip low in the sky, Nadine helped tidy up. She collected stray papers, folded chairs, and gathered empty cups. A small group of parents stayed behind to help. They thanked her and praised the center. A mother said in Dutch, "This place changed my daughter's world." Nadine translated for Peter, who nodded with pride. Nadine felt her heart swell with gratitude. When the last guests left and the center stood quiet once more, Nadine locked the doors and turned off the lights. She walked through the empty halls. Touching the walls lined with children's art, she remembered the first day she set foot here alone, nervous and uncertain. Now, she walked proudly, carrying the stories of families, the laughter of children, and the trust of her community. Back at the hotel, Nadine changed into her maid's uniform and moved through the lobby with practiced ease. As she polished the front doors, she thought of the 2 lives she led: early mornings dusting marble floors, late mornings teaching art, afternoons translating speeches, evenings solving problems, nights studying Dutch, mornings greeting guests. Both felt natural to her now, like 2 hands working together in harmony. That night, after the hotel closed, Nadine sat in her apartment, the silver pin glowing softly on her lapel. She opened her notebook and wrote down her memories of the day: the speeches, the laughter, the poems, the pin. She paused, then added a sentence: "I found my home here." She closed the notebook and leaned back, letting out a contented sigh. Before sleep claimed her, Nadine thought of her parents and her sister in Rotterdam. She imagined calling them in the morning to tell them everything. She thought of the next month's plans: after-school reading sessions, sports days, language workshops. She felt excitement stir in her chest. Her journey was far from over. As she drifted off, Nadine closed her eyes with a soft smile, knowing that life had brought her here for a reason. She had learned 2 languages, 2 cultures, and found a way to weave them into something beautiful. In her dreams, she heard voices speaking Dutch and English in harmony, a song of welcome and belonging. And she knew, with a gentle certainty, that this was only the beginning of her story.